What's good, y'all? This is Ray Daniels, aka the Culture Referee, and this is a special edition of the GAUDS Show. As you all know, Puff Daddy, Sean Diddy Combs is facing the RICO Act, and I feel like the community has been kind of like mixed up a little. Like it's kind of like we're mad, but then it's like, what did he really do? Or everybody's trying to figure out, because I don't think a month ago any of us would have bet money that Puff would be in jail, one, and that he would be in jail without a bond, two, right? Like everybody in my world kind of felt like it was cute, like, oh, he's in trouble, whatever. But this shit is serious, right? Yeah. So as I was sitting at home, I was asking, arguing. Me and my lady was talking, and we was like just talking about the charges, and I'm like, I think, and I'm being honest, I'm like, I think somebody could say I sex trafficked them, right? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I flew a female somewhere, and she hit me like, before I come, I need to pay a babysitter, or I'm gonna miss 2 days of work. I need you to send me some money. That's a normal thing when you're flying someone there, and getting flued out is a huge part of our community conversation. Like if you get flown out, you gotta have sex. It's been in our community forever, but I don't think anyone looked at it as this serious. So as I was thinking about it, I made a phone call to my brother, Christian Wise, and I was asking him would he be willing to talk about it, because I knew he was a former assistant DA for Fulton County, and I felt like who would be better to explain to us regular people what's going on. So for me, I just wanted to talk it out from a legal standpoint. And so the only question that I plan on asking, and if you want to have something in the chat, you can ask questions. The only question I plan on answering is questions pertaining to the trial or from a DA's perspective. Okay. I'm not trying to ask, was he right or wrong? None of that matters. This is strictly from a legal perspective for regular people to even understand, A, why is this so blown out of proportion, right? Because the music business was built on sex, drug, and rock and roll. I mean, Playboy is $1 billion business that was built on sex, drugs, rock and roll, right? So now, is this the end of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll era as we know it, or is this isolated to him because he did something bad? So for me, I just want to get into it with you and just ask questions, and then I might ask you a question from a DA's perspective, which means that he might not know he doesn't know the answer, but he can speak from a legal's perspective because he actually was in the office of a district attorney. So for me, I just really feel like this conversation was necessary. I don't think nobody could do it the way I'm gonna do it, right? So first off, I'll let you introduce yourself to everybody. The floor is yours.
Well, first, thank you for letting me be here.
For sure.
You and your team have been amazing. Shout out to y'all. My name is Christian Wise Smith. I'm an attorney in the state of Georgia. It'll be 12 years for me in December. And I'm all about helping folks out. I mean, I grew up like a lot of folks who came up in hip hop did. I grew up seeing my mom in and out of jail. My mom lost custody of me. I've seen my grandmother arrested. I have an uncle serving life, kicked out of school. I overcame a lot just to finish high school. I never thought that I would go to college or get a master's degree or become an attorney. So me having the education that I have has made me very passionate about wanting to serve and wanting to help people.
Because you're one of us. And to me, I think that's the reason why I hit Christian 11 o'clock at night, guys. Like, hey, can I talk? And I know how much you care, and I know you're one of us, and I know that this conversation, I know other people in that position are not one of us. They can be owned, right? And I kind of want to get into that. So I want to ask you, my first question is, what is the RICO Act, right? Yeah. And from my perspective, it's a organization, right? So it's a racketeering, I have it written down. What's the I for racketeer?
Racketeering, influence, corrupt organization.
Influence. Yeah. That was the word that I saw, and I was like, this word don't feel like it needs to be a legal word, because what is influence, right? Right. But why, if it's a RICO Act, why are they only arresting Puff? If it's a RICO Act, right? Does that mean that they're arresting him because he is, they're planning on coming after all people, more people? Like, why are they using the RICO Act to go after him? I'm just curious.
So let me kind of preface before I answer with how lawyers learn or how we learn in law school.
Perfect.
On day one
That's
of
what
law
we want. Give us the real.
Yeah, day one of law school, we learn the definition of burglary. It's the breaking and entering into the dwelling house of another at night.
At night.
Right. So
It's not daytime.
right. So why do I say that? Why do they teach us that on day one? They're teaching us that because you have to break down every word to be able to interpret that law. And you just caught it.
Yep.
Right. If it's not nighttime, or if it's a commercial building, meaning nobody lives there, then there's some wiggle room, and that's how you get the back and forth, the negotiations, all of that. That's why you have trials. People interpret the law differently. So let's start with kind of the history of why the RICO Act came about. President Nixon signed it into law in 1970.
Okay.
And it was initially targeted for mob and
mafia
bosses. Because often the folks at the top of the food chain would orchestrate, would call the shots, but the government had no way of holding them accountable.
Because it was intermediates between.
Right. They couldn't put the smoking gun in their hands. They couldn't put the drugs in their hands. They couldn't connect them to crimes directly. So the government had to say or figure out, how can we catch these guys? So Georgia, which I'm licensed in Georgia, we developed our own RICO law in 1980.
Got you.
So let's start with the definition, right? So, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. You good? No, you good. Don't worry about it. You good.
So in Georgia, it says that crime to participate in an enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity or conspiring to do so.
Yes.
So let's talk about what an enterprise is.
Yes.
An enterprise can be you and me.
Yep.
It could be just me. It could be just you. It could be your group, right?
Okay. How is that though? How is that legally? Enterprise can be one person? Okay.
Think about a company, right?
Yes.
An LLC can be one person.
Yep.
It can be everybody in this room.
For sure.
So that's why it's defined that way. And then having a goal, right? If you have a goal of your business is to make money, your business is to be a nonprofit and help people, or if it's a criminal enterprise, your goal could be sell drugs, prostitute, whatever.
Yep.
But it's important to know that the goal does not have to be met or accomplished in order to fall into the definition.
Yes.
So then let's talk about racketeering activity. So that means to commit, attempt to commit, or solicit, coerce, or intimidate someone else to commit a crime.
Okay.
So there's a lot to unpack there,
I would say that's a lot. Yep.
I can do the crime myself.
Please.
I can attempt to do the crime and fail. I can hire someone or threaten, intimidate, or force someone.
What about ask?
Same thing. That would be soliciting.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Same thing. Right. So now pattern of racketeering activity means you have to show that you've done it at least twice. And then I think one of the more complex parts of this, let's talk about conspiracy. The best way that I can kind of help you visualize to understand what a conspiracy is, think about one of the rims, the tires on your car.
Yep.
You have the lug nuts in the middle.
Yep.
So for what we're going to talk about, we'll say that this is puff.
Yep.
Then you have the different rims that go from the lug nuts. They never touch each other, right? So you don't have to know the plan of the conspiracy.
Okay.
All the conspirators don't have to know each other.
Yeah.
They just all have to be connected to that person in the center. So I think one of the ways you kind of preface this was, why are other people not being charged yet? Right now, Puff is the center or the head.
Yep. So
you go after him, then you go after these other parts that all connect around this wheel to this person in the center. So that's the best way I can break that down.
So does that mean that there are other people coming that you might think and this is from your perspective, does that mean that they're going to indict more, or does that mean, like, what is happening from inside the DA's office? Like, how are they viewing it in your opinion?
Good example would be the Jeff Williams or the Thug trial. Okay. Right? They might be using the other people to turn witness against Puff.
For sure.
So they might go to these other folks and say, look, we can charge you with A, B, Z, X, Y, Z, or you testify against him, you can cut a deal, immunity, reduce sentence, whatever. Yep. So then I think it would depend on how the conversations with those folks and their attorneys go, depending on whether or not they're going to be charged.
So you think that the DA office has already been in contact with other people who might be affected by this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
See, that's why I don't know. Like, I'm just wondering. Like, I'm like, so the other people are being affected by it. They're being contacted. I want to ask you a question. What is sex trafficking exactly? Have I ever like, because let me be honest with you. We saw Boosie, what Boosie came out and said, where he was like, man, this is what all entertainers do. When we're seeing, from my perspective, what we're seeing what Puff is doing or what they accuse him of doing, we've seen it done every day in our careers. Like, it's like you go to parties and there's a bowl if you want ecstasy pills. Like, you get to partake in it if you or not. But why are they going after him? Like, what is sex trafficking? Like, what is it that he's doing? Like, I just want to understand.
So let me read the definition first and let's break it
Perfect.
down. This is the definition from the United States Department of Justice. And it says it's the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, coercion, or if the person is under 18, then that's something different.
What is a commercial sex act?
So a commercial sex act is any sex act where someone or where something of value was given, promised, or received by any person. This can include gifts, clothing, protection, food, shelter, right? So
that sounds like a relationship to me.
But so
okay.
The element though is that was there force, fraud, or coercion for
so what
the
is
act of
what
sex?
is force, what is fraud, and what is coercion? Like, how can someone force fraud or how do you do that? Like,
easy answer for force is rape.
Of
right?
course.
So fraud or coercion is, am I lying and telling you that I'm going to pay your bills if you do this for me? Then I don't pay your bills. Or do I lie and tell you I'm going to give you a job and I don't? I'm going to pay for your college and I don't. I'm going to pay for your daycare. You mentioned that earlier.
Wow.
Any lie in order to get that sex act, right? That's fraud.
So hold on. All men have done that since the beginning of time. Like, not being funny enough, but men have done that, period. And we're not going to use the R word anymore. We're not going to use the R word right there anymore because they don't like that word, right? So even though this is legal, I got it. But what I'm saying is like, so basically what it sounds to me is that any man in history.
But you got to meet all of these elements, though,
okay.
Right? So was there some type of exchange of value for the act of sex, right? Because if it's just a relationship, if we're dating, we're hanging out, we're having fun, I'm not giving you something for you to be with me. But it becomes different if the whole purpose or the exchange is about something of value.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
But isn't that what happens every day? Like, you meet a woman, especially in Atlanta, like, I call Atlanta it's a transactional city, right? You meet a girl and she be like, we can hang out, but I need help with this, right? And you might do it for the first month, but then you might experience her and be like, no, this ain't worth it. And now you backed off. Can she sue?
So the first part of your question, if there's some exchange or offer of exchange of value, that will make it a commercial sex act. Now, do you have that other element?
Yes.
Is there fraud? Is there coercion? Is there force?
Yep.
If there's none of that, then no.
The fraud, though, can be a lie.
Right, but did the act take place under force, fraud, or coercion? Right. Gotcha. So there's two different elements, and you have to meet both. You can have sometimes you have one or the other, but not necessarily both.
Yeah.
I think in order to have both, in order to have a case, you need both.
Yeah.
And I think those are what the allegations against Puff right now is that he has both and then some. So some of the allegations in the indictment are that he used drugs to take people's free will away, if you will.
For sure.
In order to control them to do what he wanted. He allegedly paid people to perform these acts. There was, the fraud in terms of him controlling folks' careers,
yes.
Controlling folks' salaries.
So it's the coercion and fraud comes from him being the boss, if you will, and having all these characters who are playing roles that he's basically directing.
Right.
And to me, that sounds like a game that most powerful men have played. So is this the end of that era, you think? Like, I know there are people in entertainment, I'm being honest with you, that are shit in their boots. Because they're like, what did I do wrong? Like, and it was just sex, drugs, rock and roll. So then people came after it. So I want to ask you, like, so why did the and I have a lawyer friend, and she told me something. She said, when the DEA or whoever, remember when they organized the kicking in of his doors in Miami and LA at the same time? When they did that, first of all, why was cameras there? Why were helicopters there? Did they had to have let the news know for it to happen at the same time. That's a game that the DA plays. This might be selling out your whole world, so
No.
Okay.
I'm all about transparency and doing things the right way. It could have been a leak from an office.
Got you.
So someone was alerted like, hey, this is about to go down. This is a big story.
Got you.
And that's very commonplace in DA's offices, which is part of the corruption, which is part of why a lot of people get upset with. I mean, there's several reasons to be upset with law enforcement and the justice system, and we can touch on those too. So yeah, that's part of it.
So let's go through a short, like just a miniature timeline.
Yeah.
Cassie files her lawsuit. All the blogs are talking about it. Oh my God, he was having sex with men and women and these freak offs. It was almost like gossip, right? In the form of a lawsuit, he pays, right? Then once he paid, a lot of other lawsuits followed, right? Because he paid literally the next day, right? He didn't fight it in court. So now all these other lawsuits follow. Then here comes the DEA or the federal government kicking in both of his doors at the same time to gather intel on him, right? And my lawyer friend said at that moment, if you were a lawyer, he was fucked, right? She said, I would have told him, and she's a defense attorney. She said, I would have told him, you need to get your stuff together because you're fucked, right? Because what are they in your house for? And they, mind you, when they broke in the house from our perspective, we was like, this seems a little excessive to put guns in front of his kid's face. I mean, all he did was have sex with a couple women, and then it was like, now it's like serious. And now everybody's like, hold up. I can get hit with a RICO because of things that he's done, and outside of blowing up a car and the physical violence, right? Which to me, neither one says federal indictment. They say crimes, but they don't say government coming after you. They usually say crimes for whoever did it. So I want to ask you, when was the Cassie lawsuit, was that the nail in the coffin, or was that the spark that opened up the doors for everybody to come, in your opinion?
The spark to open up the doors. I think without Cassie, the government wouldn't have necessarily had some of the information that they would have needed to bring this indictment forward. And if you look at this indictment, I brought a copy of it.
Let's go.
It's only 14 pages, right?
Okay.
For everything we've been talking about, I would think that it would be 114 pages. But indictments can be amended. So I think right now this is kind of a skeleton or bare bones foundation in place.
Yes.
And I mean, even with what's here, I mean, I think my gut is saying 20 years at least. But what's going to happen now, because it's an ongoing investigation, right? They can add more charges as more victims come forward, as they find more evidence of the things that he may have allegedly done. So I think Cassie giving us the video of what happened to her in the hotel, I think that changed a lot of people's perspective, where it went from, gossip, maybe victim shame. And a lot of times, unfortunately, women aren't believed when they talk about things that have happened to them by men. And I wish that part of our culture were different. Me being a husband to a black woman and a father of 3 daughters, we got to pay more attention to when people come forward. And I have friends who are survivors of sexual assault, and just I know their stories. A lot of times when they would tell their parents or family members, they weren't believed, and then a lot of times that's why things get swept under the rug. So I think Cassie definitely helped open the doors up. Yeah. And then you got to think about the law that New York had, where I'm not well versed on it because I don't practice in New York, where they expanded the statute of limitations for victims of sexual assault.
And that's when everything came at once. Right. Why do you think they did that? Well, you think do you think from that, I've never heard of something like that. Let's open it up for a couple months.
I mean, it could have been pressure on the legislators. It could have been pressure on victims advocates groups. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. But I will say this, and kind of taking a little tangent, just for everybody out there who thinks that voting does not matter. Yes. That's a perfect example of why voting matters. Voting impacts every aspect of our life in the United States. This room we're sitting in right now was zoned a commercial space
Yeah.
by somebody who wrote that legislation, who was voted in office.
Got you.
Another tangent. I'm sorry, I
Go
got to
ahead,
go here. I
please.
don't mean to hijack your show.
No, this is our show. We doing this together. Let's go.
But Missouri executed Marcellus Williams last week, right? And there was a lot of talk about evidence there that could have exonerated him. The prosecutor didn't want him to be executed. The victim's family didn't want him to be executed. But the governor didn't step in. The United States Supreme Court didn't step in. So again, a direct reflection of how voting matters, because those people who are making these decisions were voted into office.
You said 20 years based on what you read. What did you see in there that made you come up with the equation and guess the equation that it's 20 years? Like what did he actually do that, what are they accusing him of doing that you say entails a 20-year sentence?
So there are allegations of drugs, guns, the R word.
Yep.
There are allegations of sex trafficking, and there's some allegations of some underage people. I don't remember if the underage are in this indictment necessarily, but I know in some of the civil suits or some of the other allegations that have come out. So I think just in culmination, like if you look at each of those charges and what the sentencing guidelines carry for each one of them, depending on whether if he goes to trial or not, if he negotiates some kind of a deal, that number just came to my head as a number that kind of feels about right.
So I'm gonna ask you, let's say, I'm gonna put you in a hypothetical situation because I know you're smart. And I also know you fly the right way. So I'm gonna challenge you a little bit. Let's say the entire time that Puff Daddy was doing these things, I don't think he knew that they were gonna get him in this kind of trouble. I just don't think. Maybe I'm wrong, but me guessing, I know sometimes I speed, right? And I know if I speed, if I get caught, this is a $300 ticket. I know that, right? But you speed anyway, right? But I don't think if I sped, I'm gonna end up in a federal indictment. Hold up, right? So I don't think that he thought an indictment was this. So I wanted to ask you a question. Let's say this entire time he was doing all those things and you was his attorney. How would you have told him to legally protect himself while doing the acts?
Well, first, if I was his attorney and I found out he was doing these acts, I would have told him to stop.
Okay, so let's be that. Let me be him for a minute.
Okay.
You telling me to stop. I'm gonna ask you, stop what exactly?
So you was in your example, right?
Yep.
If you speed, knowing that you're speeding, knowing that it's a $300 fine and you do it anyway, that's one thing. But taking it to the other extreme, if you kill somebody
While speeding.
okay. In any form.
Okay.
If you kill somebody, knowing that you can go to prison for life, but you do it anyway, you're willing to take on those consequences. So at no point do I think that Puff ever thought what he was doing was right.
Yes. Was right?
I don't think he ever thought that.
Well, I don't think he thought it was right. I'm saying I don't think he thought it would land him in jail for 20 years.
That's what he knew what he was doing.
You think he knew it was going to land him in jail for 20 years?
He might not have thought he was going to go to jail, maybe because of the money and the influence and the connections, maybe because of that, but because of what he was doing, he had to know at some point that he was putting himself at risk, right? But to your point, though, right, in talking about the 70s and the 80s, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll culture, I think a lot of people back in those times didn't think that they would face consequences just because it was culturally accepted at that time. But then as we started to shift, as social media comes about and we have more access to things, when I was in elementary school, everything was encyclopedias. Like you had to go to the library to get stuff. But by the time I was in law school, everything was on your laptop. Right? So as the world changes, so does what's culturally acceptable
and what we have access to.
And what we have access to. And I think now, because we have access to so much information, we have access to the security footage that shows what happened with Cassie, where in the 70s and 80s, you don't have that footage. So knowing those things, he had to have known at some point this was coming.
So let's say he's like, but Christian, I'm having the time of my life. And everybody around me is having the time of my life. So how can I protect myself in this scenario? With these women, should I get them to send me invoices? I know that sounds like ridiculous, but it's like, if she send me an invoice, then that means I'm doing something up and up. Like, Am I paying them cash? Should I write them checks so now they know what it is? Or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how could I protect myself if I'm them?
If you commit a crime, there's nothing that you can do retroactively to go back to protect yourself from it.
I want to ask you this though. So I saw this, and by the way, this is going to probably sound so silly to you because you are a lawyer. But I was watching this episode of Family Guy, right?
Okay.
And it's random, but they kicked in the door where a man paid a prostitute, right? And they was like, sir, you're going to jail. He's like, for what? And they said, for paying a prostitute. Then he goes, I'm filming it. I'm making a porno. And then the police go, yeah, you're right. It's a porno. So it's like, it's okay for me to pay her as long as I'm filming it for solicitation to sell. So it's like, so what if he filmed everything to plan on publishing it? Is it something illegal now?
The difference here, I think, versus there is now you got victims coming forward, right? Who are willing to testify that they were victims, that they were forced, coerced, threatened, all of that. So, yeah.
So that's why I wanted to go. So this is more about how the participants see it, right? Because if the participants, like I said this on this show, and I still feel this way, even though, actually I don't feel this way anymore. I'm gonna change because I didn't see the physical abuse. Once I saw that, I was like, oh, he should have paid her. Just pay her, bro. Like, you fucked up. In our world, when you do something wrong, you either gonna go to jail or you gonna pay, right? So he should have paid her. So I saw that. So, but my thoughts is that if she went on, my thought was that if she went on to become a successful recording artist, maybe she doesn't sue. But because she didn't become successful and she was in a relationship with him, but then you just really helped me see the coercion comes from she was his artist. So she didn't have no power to say yes or no anyway. That's how they viewed it.
Right. He held all the cards. He held all the leverage. He controlled her career. But I'm going to disagree with you. If she became successful, she shouldn't have said anything. I disagree with
No, I didn't say she shouldn't have.
Okay,
I was saying I don't think if she became successful, she goes after him that big.
Gotcha.
Because it made her like a victim, and most artists don't like to look like a victim in their career. That's what I'm saying.
Well, that would have been...
That's what I thought. I don't think that anymore.
Gotcha.
But that's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been a balancing act that she would have had with herself. But, you know, I would teach my daughters that...
Of course.
If anything happens...
The minute it happened.
Like, you tell me somebody getting paid a visit before,
that's what I'm saying. But
before the courts know about it.
And then what we said as men initially was she couldn't leave. She could have just left, but she couldn't. She couldn't just leave without him saying, okay, because now what happens if she leaves and he owns her career? Now I'm never putting your music out, right? So I understand more now, especially, so you really just helped me see a lot with it. Sex workers. It's like the minute we went from calling them prostitutes, which was a negative word, to sex workers, which is a more honorable word, it's almost like they became the victims and whoever was paying for the sex workers, it's almost like crack. Like nobody ever blames a crackhead for using crack. They just blame the crack dealer, right? But the crackhead did whatever they had to do to get the money to buy it. So why didn't the DA go after the sex workers also, including him? Because that's kind of the organization.
Because they aren't the ones calling the shots, right? And that doesn't mean that the attorneys aren't talking to them or potentially charging them. Right now, the conversation with them might be to get more evidence against him to bring a stronger case. But yeah, I mean, everybody who's been involved at some point will be spoken to.
Yes.
The DA will make the decision on whether or not they are a co-defendant or co-conspirator or a victim.
And that all depends on what they want to say.
I mean, and not just what they say, but what evidence that they have.
But I mean by that, their perspective. What if they say, I ain't got nothing to do with it? Well, you could be a co-defendant, or you could tell us what it is, and you can be a witness, and we won't charge you with anything.
And that happens a lot, where folks end up in situations not necessarily knowing that they are a co-defendant. Mm-hmm. Like if you're in a car with somebody and they go rob a store, and then they get back in the car with you and tell you to drive, you might not have known that they went in there and robbed the store. But once you drove that car, you become an accomplice. Unless
I could tell. They say I didn't know.
But that's how the state can play it, right? Like I can charge you as a co-defendant, or if you're willing to testify against your friend, you can cut a deal. But either way, you're part of it.
Yeah. So a lot of the talk around this Puff thing has been he pissed somebody off. he pissed somebody off. And then I saw this lawyer do a video, and he was like, that's what really triggered me to want to speak to you. He said, guys, Puff didn't piss anybody off. This is a life-changing case for whoever the DA is. And he knows this is a political move for him also. Do you think, well, from your perspective as a DA, do you think that there is somebody out there, a company powerful enough to bring down, and the reason why I don't think is that because who is more powerful than Donald Trump and the people backing him, yet Fonnie went after him. So you see what I'm saying? So it's like, do you think that there's a system powerful enough to tell you, the DA, go after him?
It depends on that DA, right? I think everything in our country is driven by dollars and cents.
Yep.
And that's why, depending on who's in office, their agenda plays out the way that it does. Like what they prioritize is based off of, a lot of times, their supporters.
Yeah.
And if their supporters want abortion rights, or if their supporters don't want it, those are the stances that they'll usually take. So whoever the DA is making calls on any case, whether it be Jeff Williams, aka Thug, or Sean Combs, aka Puff, or Donald Trump, or whoever, yeah, I mean, a lot of times you can follow the money and see where the DA's values lie.
Yeah.
And that might help enlighten you on why they are pursuing what they're pursuing.
Gotcha.
But not always. I mean, I would like to believe, because I want to believe that I'm one of those guys
who
do the
That's why I wanted to talk to you. That's why, because I knew that you're the legal version of me in the music. Like, I'd rather give you the truth, whether they like it or not, than lie to you for the sake of keeping that hierarchy in order. I don't like the hierarchy. So why would they, so people have asked this question. They say Donald Trump gets indicted and he's out, right? Puff gets indicted. He offers $50 million for bail, but he gets denied bail. Why is he getting denied bail?
Now, that's a great question that
Yes.
I don't have an answer to, because they both fall in the same category in terms of both being a flight risk.
Yep.
I mean, they both have access to more money than most people. They both have access to private jets, and they can disappear if they wanted to. They both have the ability to intimidate or influence witnesses.
Yes.
They both have the means and the ability and maybe the mental capacity to commit additional crimes if they wanted to. So that is a question that maybe it's a black and white question. Maybe it's a where they were and the locales where these charges came about, how those decisions were made. But yeah, that's a brilliant question that I don't have an answer.
Because people said that, well, my guess was that, so I have a friend, shout out to Kalina and her husband Vic. Kalina was in the group Dirty Money, and Kalina she released a statement saying, Puff's my friend, and he's never done that. And then they said that they was tracking his phone, and he called her 54 times before she did that. Now, that is influencing a witness, that is influencing the case.
Yep.
But what is different than Donald Trump doing a speech saying the same thing? They're going after me. If you can help me, write a letter to you. What's the difference?
Donald Trump making a public statement to the
Puff,
masses?
Because it can influence anyone, and Puff making a public statement, even if he didn't do it out loud, but Puff hitting Kalina saying, hey friend, if you don't believe this, can you speak up for me?
But that's the difference, though. So if Donald Trump is addressing the masses, I don't know if somebody in that crowd could potentially be called as a witness to this case. If Combs hit somebody directly who the government has been talking to, who they may potentially call as a witness, who might know some information about any of the things in this indictment, that's a little bit different. It crosses a line when you, and then, like you said, 54 times, just the perception of that, and a lot of times perception ends up becoming reality. It's, why are you calling this person 54 times to try to influence on what she's going to say about these pending charges?
So I want to pause now because I got to do this. Let's pause now. You can keep it pause or just like mute it or something like that, because I got to log into a Zoom right now. But what I also want to do is, because we can, I also want to figure out, like, kind of do like a huddle real quick with Christian for like 30 seconds, 2 minutes, just to ask him, like, is there something that he thinks we should ask?
Well, let's do that, and then we have a lot of people in the chat, so let's have them send some questions.
Yeah, so let's leave it rolling. So just mute it, but like, okay, so If you could put a graphic on and ask questions, I just want to make sure we get it.
What's good, y'all? This is Ray Daniels, aka the Culture Referee, and I'm here to talk to you about YKTV Magazine, which is the #1 magazine for prison entertainment. These prisoners are sitting in jail. They have nothing to do but read these magazines and read your ads, buy your music, support your business, anything that you can do that's online commerce. They already have published over 140 magazines with 36 major artists that have covered it, and I'm giving you an opportunity to advertise this magazine and get directly to an audience that you know has the time and the money to spend. Info at the bottom, info at the GAUDS Show. Holla at us, whether you're an artist, producer, whoever you are. We can help you with your business. Holla at us to get to YKTV.
All right, guys, so we're back. So Christian, I want to ask you, do you think that there are people, first of all, before I go this, I just saw the chat. Let me put this out there right now. I'm not on tape. No, seriously, because I've never been on tape. I've never participated in any of this. I didn't use none of the drugs. I didn't do none of it because the way I was raised was if you let the devil know what you love, he owns you. So I just did what I love privately. So for the record, this has nothing to do with that. I don't have any friends that are on tape. But what I am learning, I am trying to educate us on the laws because I believe that this Puff trial is going to change everything. I believe that this changed the way we move, right? This sex, drugs, and rock and roll era to me is dead. So I wanted to just ask you, like, the tapes, right? They got a lot of tapes, a lot of film, if you want. And who gets in trouble from the film? You're the DA. Yeah. You watching it. You see a big ass orgy, right? On tape, you're watching it, and you see celebrity faces, you know. How do you view that? Like, should they be worried? Do you want to air them out? Like, what's your strategy after that moment? You see a celebrity on it. Do you air them out? Do you put them on notice and say, hey, tell me what you know? If you don't, like, how does that go?
So if other celebrities or other people are on tape and they are actively participating in administering the drugs?
No, the sex.
Well, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Right? But if they are actively participating in the force, coercion, or fraud in order to get the sex, then yeah, they absolutely have some concerns that they should be worried about.
The people on the tapes.
Right.
Yes.
But now if the people on the tapes were just participating in the activity.
The fun of it all. What they call it.
Well, for some people, it doesn't sound like it was fun. It sounded like it was forced and coerced and maybe against their will. But yeah, if some people were just participants, then they might not necessarily have to worry about criminal charges. But you know, obviously, we know that there are two courts. There's the actual court, then there's the court of public opinion. And then they have, they have to worry about their reputations and their careers and whatever fallout may come from being on these tapes. But then I think it's going to boil down to how much they knew about what was actually going on in those rooms.
Yeah, because what is illegal about that? If I just came over and it's a good time and I want to have fun, like what's illegal about that?
So I mean, at that time,
or is it just public opinion? You can embarrass me and say Ray Daniels was there. We got him on tape. Now people associate me with it. Like I was just looking for the legal ramifications of doing exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, if you were directly involved in the force, the coercion, the fraud, all of that, then that's one thing. If you were just there for, the fun, as you want to label it as that. I mean, that's another thing that I think the DA will have to iron out those facts out and see what people knew, what roles they played to decide whether or not charges are appropriate for those people.
I think Puff made a huge mistake. I think he made a couple huge mistakes, but I think the mistake he made after being locked up was he said, I will not take a plea. To me, I thought that was, and the reason I thought that was a bad move was because now you've committed to fighting everybody. And now you got to kind of fight it out, right? So now it's like.
That's the constitutional right he has. He has the right to a trial.
Yeah.
But what often happens in criminal cases is whatever deal they put on the table up front is not going to be the same if he's convicted after trial. But he might be at the point where he's like, he might as well fight it tooth and nail anyway, because regardless, what he's done in the past, that lifestyle is over.
Got you. So you've been a DA. I'm just asking you because that's why I want to speak to you. I know 100 lawyers, but I only know one that I'm close to that actually was in the office that was punishing criminals and also fighting for the laws. By the way, Christian was the guy that was in the rooms trying to get the laws changed to not hurt his community. I just want to say that because I want people to know I'm talking to a real one, right? Not just somebody who's here. Like, I couldn't believe he showed up because I know he's so like straight up and buttoned up. And I wanted to ask you, if you were the DA, just hypothetically speaking, based on the indictment, what kind of plea do you think you will offer?
20.
So you
gonna
offer 20? But if you said if he's charged, he gets 20.
If he goes to trial and gets convicted, he might get life.
Really?
It depends on what else comes out, depending on what counts they ultimately go forward on. But I mean, there's a difference when, and I appreciate the kind words you just threw at me. There's a difference between making sure that the laws aren't over criminalizing and over punishing black folks like we know that they have, right? I mean, if you go back to emancipation and Juneteenth, right after that, black codes are created, which are laws to re-enslave or re-imprison recently freed slaves, where we could be prosecuted for things such as poor living conditions, right? Which was all of us. Like, we were leaving plantations, we had nowhere to go. And it was a way to get that free labor or to keep black people in check. And then if you look at the policing culture or system that we have, it stems off of slave catchers.
Yes.
Right, and I'll just talk about Atlanta specifically. I mean, if you go from 1865 to 1948, almost 100 years before Atlanta sees its first black police officer. So there are a lot of things that I can talk about historically of how the criminal justice system has disproportionately negatively impacted black people. But this case ain't one of them.
Okay.
what the accusations and the allegations that we have here, in my opinion, are of somebody who abused their fortunes and took advantage of a lot of people who relied on them. So I don't want anybody out there to ever say that, oh, he's being targeted or this is over prosecution of a black man, because I don't think that's what's happening here. And I say that respectfully to you and all of my friends and folks who I call family in the music industry. As you know, I've created a lot of really dope connections with you guys. You are
our attorney. Like, you are the one everybody knows and calls.
But you got to call a spade a spade. And so there's a difference between right and wrong, black and right and white. And I think here, and this is my personal opinion, right?
Okay, that's what I love. Because I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to place myself in the scenario. I'm going to ask you a question. Go ahead.
You know, it's my personal opinion. I think that he knew what he was doing was wrong. And I think, you know, as that old saying goes, what's done in the dark eventually comes to the light. And I think that's what's happening here.
So what if Puff came to you and said, as a DA, hey, man, I didn't know I was doing wrong. I'll never do it again. I'll take care of all the victims. I just want to go home and start my life over now that I know that I was committing all these crimes.
Ignorance of the law is not a defense, right? So there are people who commit crimes every day, like everyday people, teachers, the janitor,
But you just said commit crimes. But I'm saying I didn't know I was committing a crime.
Right. What I was getting to is that they commit crimes not knowing that they were committing crimes.
That's true.
Right. And when they come to court, ignorance of the law is not a defense. Right. Just because you didn't know it was illegal, that don't mean we're gonna let you walk up out of here.
So my camera guys, they like finding shit. Because you know, for us, man, you know, in our culture, you know, sometimes we play victim. Right? And to me, sometimes that doesn't work, right? Because you ain't the victim. But I think if you look at it from both sides, I think people wanted something from him, and then he wanted something from people, right? So what I'm asking is, do you think, this is a good question, do you think the DA cared that it's Puff Daddy? Or do you think he would have done that if it was Mike Johnson, who runs this $500 million enterprise? Do you think he would have done that, or do you think he did it because it's Puff?
I think we gotta, before I answer that, I would want to know his track record. Like, has he done it before? I think that helps us answer this question. Like, is he somebody who truly cares about justice and victims and protection? If he's done it before, then it doesn't matter that it's Puff.
Yeah.
If he hadn't, and he's trying to make a name for himself, or he has ambitions for other office, and this is going to give him the popularity that he needs, or he's going to get a book deal or whatever out of this. I mean, I think I would want to know his track record before I answer that question. And it's unfortunate that I have to think that way, because there are some people who are motivated by the notoriety that can come with doing the job that you're supposed to do, because it's the noble and right thing to do.
And the reason I'm asking that is because today I still think, like, we don't care who the DA is. But today, I think the entire country knows Fonnie Willis.
Yeah.
Because she did two things. She went after a big political whale, and she went after a big music whale. Yeah. So Young Thug and Donald Trump, we all know Fonnie now, right? This DA, back-to-back days, goes after Puff Daddy and then Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City. Yeah. Now he's on the news every day. So now he's a political figure. Yep. And it feels like there is some political gain, because I didn't know who the New York DA is. Now I do. Now I'm really interested, because one of my favorite TV shows is Billions, and it's about a DA chasing a billionaire. And I just wonder, do you as a DA, do you send warnings? Because on Billions, right? And if anybody watches Billions, it's ill.
Bobby Axelrod.
Bobby Axelrod. But the first episode starts off with the DA getting word that Bobby Axelrod is about to buy an $80 million house. And the DA goes, people don't like guys that spend $80 million on a house. So he goes, tell him, if he buys that house, I'm going to look into him. And he bought the house, and that's when the whole 7 seasons of the war starts. But it started because Bobby Axelrod did something. Do you think the DA said something like, tell him no more promoting liquor. Tell him no more parties. If he does one more party, I'm on his ass. And he was like, I told you that we won't stop. And then, not being funny enough, but I'm like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm wondering, do you believe that a game like that was being played? And the only reason I ask you that is because the day before Puff went to jail, it was like footage of him, like the last time seen free. And every time you saw him, he was smiling, like love, smiling. Everybody's like, oh my God, they love Puff. But it's like, and I was thinking, I don't think he knew he was going to jail. And I don't think he knew, and I don't think he didn't think that then tomorrow night he would wake up in his bed. Yeah. I don't think he thought that. So, but it's like, so it feels like he didn't know he was playing the game with these people.
I mean, that's a great question. And I think part of the answer, even looking at his indictment, it says that some of these things started back in 2008, 2009. Mm-hmm. So then the question becomes, why didn't the previous prosecutor and attorney bring charges? I'm not sure how many in line there have been since 2008 to now in 2024. But the same thing with what I call him Jeff, with Young Thug, with his trial, is I think they started looking into him back in like 2013, 2012. And so why didn't the previous DA bring charges? And so there's always those questions,
it felt like they needed noise to justify going after him.
Or what's the motivation, right?
That's what I'm saying.
What I was mentioning earlier is whoever's in office, you kind of see what they prioritize. And a lot of that is based off of their supporters and just the things that they find important. Some people think violent crime, like let me attack this, I can kind of put the white collar crime on a back burner. But then some people are the opposite. I think Billions was, he's more focused on a white collar crime. Yeah. So I think it just depends on who has that seat and the vision they have for the office on how they attack the different crimes they go about.
Jack, make sure you get the questions from the chat, because after this one, I'm going to go to questions, so just gather them if we have it. Do you think that, by the way, this is incredible because I understand it now. So just for the record, you're a man, you're a player, you hot girls, you flying them in, and of course you're doing what a man's supposed to do, that women like you. You're sending them money, looking out for. The only way it doesn't become sex trafficking is if we make sure when it's over, she's cool with it.
I wouldn't say when it's over. I would beforehand. Like, look, is this consensual? Like, is there any misconception?
That's what I was asking you. So, like, if you was Puff's lawyer, would you say send text to them and be like, hey, just for the record, are you enjoying this?
No. See,
Okay.
the difference is Puff stuff is out after the fact. I'm saying before the fact.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if you was his lawyer in the middle of doing it, saying, well, look, if you still want to do the parties, just make sure that everybody that walks in here signs this paperwork.
No.
Oh, no, you don't do that.
There's nothing legal about what he did. I'm talking about for your everyday, regular guy who's worried about, if I fly this girl out, could I be facing some charges?
Okay.
You make sure everything up front is consensual, and you make sure that everything up front is not being, that the sex is not coming because of something that you're exchanging.
Yes.
And if there's clouds over that, if there isn't a clear answer, don't go forward with it. My advice to all the men out there.
My last question for me, NDA. It was kind of like the thing that protected the monsters, if you will, and it's a legal document that can scare the hell out of somebody. Mm-hmm. Can you explain to me how it's legal to go against an NDA, right? Because that's what's happening. A lot of people sign NDAs. And if it's legal to go against the NDA, and if it's not legal in certain cases, then what is the point of an NDA? An NDA, for people that don't know, is a non-disclosure agreement, which means that you can't talk about what's happening right now publicly, right?
So the first part of my answer is you can't use an NDA to cover up a crime. So if I'm a victim of the R word, if I'm a victim of sex trafficking or human trafficking, if I've been forced, threatened, coerced, fraud,
Yes.
like this piece of paper doesn't protect you from me being wronged.
Yeah.
Now, what I think historically with people in your world or the celebrity was there may have been extramarital affairs or whatever, where it's like, look, this is consensual, but you can't talk about this so that it doesn't mess up my marriage or mess up my life. But I'm not R-wording you or trafficking you or any of that. But I think where the lines are crossed, or what's different about this case with Combs is that there's so many other allegations of other illegal activity that an NDA wouldn't have meant anything in a situation like this.
Okay, Jack, any questions?
Somebody asked, can you ask him to explain the Mann Act? Are you familiar with that?
The Mann Act?
That's exactly what it's called.
We don't know what the Mann Act is. Give me another one just in case.
You gotta be more specific, whoever said
I
that.
might have to Google that.
Like the Mann Act.
Well, here's one. Someone asked, do you feel like more high-profile celebrities will be dealing with this same type of case soon?
Potentially. I mean, if there were, as Ray mentioned, folks coming from the culture of the 70s and 80s that grew into now, the sex, drugs, rock and roll. I mean, if there are folks out there who live similar lifestyles to him, potentially, yeah. I mean, and we've seen kind of similar things before. If you think about Bill Cosby and how a lot of that stuff came out later, the football player Darren Sharper. I mean, there have been instances in the past where R. Kelly, where celebrities have done things to force, coerce, threaten, abuse people when they're getting what they wanted sexually. So I'm very confident that this won't be the last one.
So this is more of a comment, but I'm going to kind of turn it into a question. So Quayshawn said that the labels are also culpable in the commission of these crimes.
Oh yeah, that's it. By the way, that's a good one because they listed Lucien Grange in the original indictment when Lil Rod sued him. He said Lucien Grange was in it and they removed him. But like, that's a good question. Like, can whoever was funding Puff be like, because if that's the case, then you can't say it was somebody bigger because Diageo can went after too because they were supplying him with the money to be who he is.
This is
That's a great question.
Yeah, great question. And this is why I started off with the definitions. And we talked about what an enterprise is. And an enterprise can be one person or a group of people.
Yeah.
So if the prosecution has evidence that these other folks from the labels were supplying, paying, buying the plane tickets, the drugs, whatever active role they played in this, then yes, they can be charged as well. Or the government might be using them to turn witness against Paul.
You got anything else, Jack?
Everything else is just a lot of comments.
Okay, so I want a lot of comments. So you want to read some of the comments? Because what I want to ask is that the civil case, no, it's two parts. You're the DA. You're sitting DA. You went after, I mean, let's be clear, Sean Combs is one of the most famous black men alive. You went after a big whale. But now that you went after that whale, you got the office being flooded talking about other whales. When do you pull that trigger? Is there a such thing as being too stretched as a DA, where you went after, like even what we saw yesterday with the judge threatened to throw, with the mistrial going in, it's like, is there such thing as biting off more than you can chew from the DA's office, who it feels like has unlimited resources? And I don't want to forget this question. I want to put it out there. Let's use Young Thug, for example. Young Thug has been locked up since May of 2022. He's been locked up on accusations. He's missed hundreds of millions of dollars being locked up. They find he's not guilty, or it's a mistrial. Do they have to free him as a mistrial? And if they do they have? Can he sue the government for the money lost? Right? Because to me, that's my only issue with it. It's like denying a man an opportunity to feed his family based on accusations that haven't cost anyone their life, or like not Jeffrey Epstein, my guy Bernie Madoff, who robbed so many people, right? Where you actually have victims. This Puffin, on the other hand, he could have just paid his victim off. He could have went away. So I'm just wondering, like, does he sitting in jail for the next 3 years? When he get out, do the DA just go, man, I'm sorry, let bygones be bygones? I just missed 3 years of my life, though. Like, how does that factor into all of these things?
So first, talking about a mistrial, if it results in a mistrial, that does not automatically mean he gets to come home.
Yeah.
Now, he'll have another bond hearing where he could still potentially be denied bond until the new trial starts. But if he, at the end of this trial, if he is exonerated, then yeah, like he's let go immediately. But then the issue about could he file a suit for wrongful arrest?
Kind of don't want to poke the bear.
I wouldn't even say that. I mean, it maybe, but probably not, because then they'll look at the warrants and how he got indicted and how they found the probable cause and what evidence they have. They may say there was enough probable cause here, which the standard for probable cause is lower than the standard for conviction, which is beyond reasonable doubt.
So can you explain to us the difference? I don't understand probable cause and reasonable doubt.
Got you. So probable cause means can the officers articulate why they are stopping you, why they're charging you, why they're arresting you?
From an arresting standpoint. Okay, got you.
Right, like from inception, officers have to be able to articulate that. They have to be able to say, here's why we want to arrest this person. We believe that Ray Daniels stole this water
and based on this evidence.
Right, so we have enough here to arrest you, but we don't necessarily have enough at this point to convict you. But it's enough to get the process started. But then once you have a trial, beyond reasonable doubt means that the prosecution has to show evidence where the jury can say, but for the defendant's guilt, this crime didn't happen. Yeah. And let me kind of differentiate, because you kind of touched on this a little bit, between a civil trial. Yeah. So, and the best example I can give is OJ, right? OJ was tried for the murder, and then there was also a civil trial for wrongful death. In the murder trial, the criminal trial, the jury, they acquitted him. They said that we don't believe he did this. It's not enough evidence to confirm to us he did this. Right, not enough evidence to say he did it beyond a reasonable doubt. But in a civil trial, he was found liable, because the standard is a little bit lower. It's by the preponderance of the evidence. So it's more likely or not. So are the civil trial based on a judge, or is it based on a jury? Jury. So he had 2 jury trials, right? The criminal one, they acquitted, not enough to convict, to send you to prison beyond a reasonable doubt. But in a civil trial, they said, we think there's enough to say more likely than not you wrongfully caused the death of these people. But the penalty in a civil trial is not jail. The penalty in a civil trial is so it's kind of like, so it's an emotional thing. It's like, we feel like you should take care of this family because we feel like it wasn't proven in court that you did it, but we believe that you had a role in it. Is it that? So it's a criminal case or a crime is an act or a violation against society, right? Yes. That's why in criminal trials is state v. whoever. Yes. Because the prosecutor, they act on behalf of all of us. saying, okay, you killed this person, you committed a crime against humanity or the well-being of all of us. But a civil trial or tort law is what we call it, is a crime against the person. So in a civil trial, it would say Daniels v. Wise,
Yes.
right? Because it's not the state
Oh,
bringing it.
it's the other one is State versus OJ. This one is the Goldman family versus Simpson.
Exactly.
And
right.
and what did the Goldman family have to do for the jury to reward them money?
They had to show that more likely than not, he wrongfully caused her death. In a criminal trial,
More likely than
not. That's the standard.
That's the standard.
In a criminal trial, it's beyond a reasonable doubt.
Boom.
Right.
This is why I wanted to do this, because we don't really, and I've been telling you this for years, like as black people, we don't really know the laws, but we only really care when it's one of us. Like, it's kind of like when the OJ trial, we're like, hold on. Yeah. That's the first time I ever heard of a civil case with the OJ trial. Because I remember my political science teacher telling us, he might got off, but they're going to get him in a civil trial. And we was 16, like 15, like, what are you talking about? It was a civil trial, right? Yeah. But in this case, that's a little different, right? Because if Puff was convicted as a criminal, then the civil cases follow. Or if he went to trial and he won. But in this case, the civil trial basically hit the switch for the criminal trial.
Yep.
So I think that was the part that was like, holy shit, you know what I mean? Like, how is it? So I want to ask you, people say Puff's trial is federal, Thug's trial is state. Mm-hmm. That's true?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the difference? Because they were still both brought down by local DAs. It wasn't like they were brought down by national DA. The Attorney General, they was brought down by local DAs. So how do we know what's the difference and what makes them different?
So the prosecutor in Puff's case is a U.S. attorney. So the United States attorney, they prosecute on behalf of the government. And usually in cases involving the feds, state lines were crossed, or a lot of times with sex trafficking. It doesn't necessarily mean that state lines were crossed because it's sex trafficking, but in a case like his, there was Miami, there was California, there are multiple states. His part of the enterprise of bad boys in New York, part of it in California. So I think because there's so much going on with him specifically, the federal prosecutor came in and said, we're going to do this, versus a New York prosecutor coming in and only trying the crimes that happen in New York. The federal prosecutor can try the crimes that happen wherever. But here, for the Thug case in Georgia, our local Fulton County DA brought those charges as violations under Georgia state law, since all of those crimes allegedly happened here in the state of Georgia. Got you.
So there's a possibility that I know this is probably a dumb question, but maybe it's not. So in the case of the federal case that Puff is facing, can the state attorneys come in? Or, because I know that they said that in the Fonnie case that the feds can decide to pick it up if they wanted to. Am I making sense? I don't even know if I'm making sense.
No, what you're saying is, I hear what you're saying. So at any point, if there's enough for the federal government to want to come in and bring charges, if they have it, they can come and do it.
Yes.
But a lot of times they'll work together, like in a case like with Fonnie and Thug. I'm sure that they had some conversations at some point, especially since some of the allegations in that case are guns and drugs too. Maybe there were state lines that were crossed. Maybe there's some other things that we just don't know yet that hadn't come out in that trial. But I mean, at this point, that trial doesn't seem that great.
The one here in Georgia.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there was a conversation at some point where the feds were like, look, you got it, you go forward with it. And I'm sure in Puff's case, I'm sure they're talking to the local DAs in California and New York and probably Florida as well, or wherever victims are, to get whatever information and evidence that they have to help them do that case on that level.
Last question, and then we done. From your perspective, and I'm asking you, I'm putting you on the spot. I'm only asking that because I'm in the music industry and people put me on the spot all the time. From your perspective, what do you think, if you had to predict what you think would happen based on you understanding the politics, understanding the laws, understanding the difference between the federal government and state, local, based on all of those factors you did, what do you think happens over the next 12 to 18 months? in this Puff trial? What do you think happens?
I think more victims are going to come out.
Okay.
Number one. And I think that you are going to see a shift in the entertainment business. Where, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of the ways of the past, they aren't going to go away necessarily because we've become better human beings, but I think because of the exposure and how easy it is to get information now, that's going to make people adjust how they live their lives. And I will say, being positive and forward thinking, I hope that a shift starts to happen in our culture where you start to see dads being dads again. And you start to see more of an emphasis on black families being strong. That's just something I want to see personally.
Yeah, for sure.
Back more to what you're saying, legally, I do think that we're going to see a lot more laws come about in place to protect victims and give victims the platform and the support that they need for cases like this. Because a lot of times, you might be a victim and not know that you're a victim. Yeah. I mean, if you're a 16-year-old girl and you're impressed by this person with fame and money, you might be easy to and that's why a lot of times women who are underage are preyed on because of the gullibility and the impressionability. And I think we'll see a lot more things put in place to protect our kids and women overall.
I got a question.
Go ahead, Jack.
Why do you think no women are ever charged with these type of cases? Because just like how it happens to men, I know that it goes the other way too.
Do the men come forward and go to the government, right? Do the men come forward and go to police officers and say, hey, I was victimized, I want to press charges? I think a lot of it is maybe what we think masculinity is supposed to be. It might be harder for men to come forward, and that's probably why we don't see cases where the roles are reversed, because men probably just don't or haven't been able to get over that barrier yet. But I agree with you. I mean, I think if any man was victimized, or sometimes we see it in schools, right, where you have a female teacher who is having sex with underage boys. We do see cases like that. But even though in those instances, the boys, they think that they are coming into manhood faster, or they think that it's something good, where really, and this is what I was saying, like they're a victim and they don't know that they are. But a lot of that is based off what we've been doing as a society and kind of the messaging we've been putting out. But I want to see that shift where you're right. If you're a man or a woman, a victim is a victim. And I think that we should start to address those things.
No, but just that, because what I was asking, the original last question was, I was asking from specifically speaking on this trial.
Gotcha.
Like, do you think that, because now everybody's like, how long does he sit in jail for? Like, do we wait for a trial? Like, when does the trial start? Does it start ASAP? Does it start a year from now? So that means he's gonna sit for a year. If they do start, like, inside, like, they're seeing tapes, they're seeing things, like, what do you think from your opinion happens? Like, this is what I'm asking you. We are on TMZ Live and we're asking the legal person, what do you think happens the next 12 months?
So I think it's gonna be similar to what happened in Jeff or in Thug's trial, because he's so well known. I think the hardest thing to do is going to be to get a jury in place, right? Finding a jury that doesn't have a strong opinion one way or another. I mean, it took a year to put a jury in, or close to a year to put a jury in trial for Thug's trial. Then the people who won't have the hardships for having to be on a jury that might be a year or two. I mean, that's going to take a long time to get a jury in place to even start the trial. Got you.
So do you think that in that time they're looking at videos and they're contacting people saying, hey, we have you on a video. Do you know he was recorded? Do you want, like, almost to bring more people against him to make him fall for the, that's why I said I think the biggest mistake he made is that he said he's gonna fight. Because what happens if they come to him with a plea and they like, hey man, we'll get you off for free if you just go after somebody, a bigger whale?
I mean, again, just kind of, I think the Young Thug trial, for as much of a circus as it's become, is kind of a good
example
to watch for this case, because it's dealing with a high-profile person, also in the music industry. But in that trial, I think the government said that they were going to bring over 100 witnesses, or whatever the number was. So you're right. In a case like this, once they go through all of the tapes, once they go through all of the label employees and
they announce witnesses. So is that how they leverage media?
What do you mean?
Like almost saying like, we have another witness against Puff. Oh, we have another witness. Another A-list celebrity said he's going to testify. Not saying who it is, but also to make Puff say, you know what, let me just take this plea.
Storytelling and controlling the narrative is always a big spade, right?
Yeah.
And on either side, you want to have as much of it as you can. I don't think that the government necessarily looks at it that way to go public with it. But like I mentioned earlier, every office has leaks, and you got to deal with that.
They playing dirty too.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm just saying. Like they're gonna play dirty.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But they're going to make some kind of a plea offer to Puff at some point.
And you think? And you said if it was you, it would be 20 years.
Just based off what I read so far, I mean, once more stuff comes out, it might be worse than that.
You're his lawyer. You're his defense attorney.
Now you are putting me on the
what
spot.
plea? What plea? No, not in real life. I'm saying hypothetically speaking. I'm sorry. And what plea would they bring to him for you to go to him and say, I think we take this? Because you wouldn't say take 20 years.
10.
You'll say take 10? I was thinking 3 to 5.
Is
No, I was thinking 3 to 5 because I mean
you got some of the allegations in the indictment are kidnapping, arson. I mean, obviously the drugs, the bribery, the R word. I mean,
10 you'll be like, bro, I think we should consider.
10 might be a win for him.
Okay. Well,
10 might be a win.
I want everybody to let's clap for Christian. Appreciate showing up. Thanks for watching. Like, share. Please subscribe. I plan on doing more of these. I would like to personally invite Christian to be our legal correspondent because I think that this is the first time, like, I'm clearer now. Now I feel safer speaking about it publicly. And I think that's what I was trying to get to. A lot of us are like, we feel something, but we kind of like, I feel this way because I don't know enough. But now that I know everything, man, my brother.
OG,
This is the GAUDS Show special.